Hey everybody, I'm Scott Weichel. You're listening to My Kind of Country right here on Fish Creek Radio. My guest tonight is celebrating his 60th year in music. He is one of the original Sun Records artists and is a member of the Rockabilly Hall of Fame. He's had numerous top 10 country records, including Reconsider Me and Somebody Hold Me Until She Passes By. He's continuing to tour all over the world and has recently been on Country's Family Reunion and Midwest Country on RFD. And let me tell you, folks, he has still got the pipes. It's an honor to welcome Narvel the Marvel, Narvel Felts, to My Kind of Country. Narvel, how are you tonight?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Scott. Thank you for having me on.
It's an honor to have you on the show. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I really appreciate you taking time.
Well, I'm honored to do it.
Well, we got a lot of ground to cover, but I got to talk about this song because I'll be honest with you, I'd kind of forgotten about this song, and a friend of mine played it for me the other night, and I dug it out and put it on my show, and it just blows me away, and it's called Somebody Hold Me Until She Passes By. Can you tell me the story of that one?
Yes, that was written by Sue Richards and Ava Aldridge and Roy Aldridge, and I had not heard that song until I walked into the studio that day. I was in the middle of my hit streak. This was 1975, and I had done a show with Freddie Fender the night before in a suburb of Atlantic City, New Jersey, and had my manager drove me back over to Philadelphia to stay at a motel by the airport. And so the next morning I got up early, flew to Atlanta, changed planes, and then on to Muscle Shoals, and got there at noon. And I had a noon session scheduled that day, and when I walked in the studio, they had just written that song, and they played it for me.
Oh, wow.
And my producer, manager, said, do you want to do that one? And I said, yes, I sure do, but let's do it now before I forget the melody. So we recorded that first right after I heard it. And this was somewhere in the summer of 75, but it came out toward the end of 75 and was a top 10 hit in early 76.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a beautiful song. I heard you. I watched a video of the Country's Family Reunion, and man, you had everybody on their feet when you did that song.
Oh, that really surprised me when I had my eyes shut on the last note, and when I opened my eyes, all of those folks that were big country stars, and some of them that I had grown up listening to even. And when they were giving me a standing ovation, that was really something.
Absolutely, it was well deserved. I mean, you nailed it.
Well, thank you.
I had goosebumps, man. I'll tell you what, that is a song. That's one of those that sticks with you, you know.
It has, you know. I had bigger records than that back there, like Reconsider Me went to number one, but this is the one that has kind of stood the test of time, and it seems to be my most requested song anymore.
Well, I can understand why. You know, I was talking to Gene Watson a while back, and he was talking about some of the songs that he had that were never went to number one. They were like number two or top 10, and Farewell Party was one of those. And he said, I'll take any of those. You know, he said, I'll take all the number twos you want to give me any day, because he said those are the ones that really the people really love and remember. You know.
Well, certainly that's his signature song.
Yeah. Yep. Well, tell me about Reconsider Me too. That was a smash number one for you.
Yes, it was. I had already, of course, I had been in the music business 17 years and had 30 records out before that first big hit came along. And the big one being in 1973 was Drift Away, and then I had All in the Name of Love, When Your Good Love Was Mine, Until the End of Time, I Want to Stay, and Raindrops that followed that in a row and were hits over the next couple of years. And all of them recorded in Nashville and produced by Bill Rice.
Mm-hmm.
But ABC Dot bought my recording contract from Cinnamon Records, and the Cinnamon president, Johnny Morris, came along in the deal as my producer. And so when he got ready to record me, he took me to Muscle Shoals, and I was a little nervous about that. After all these years, I had found success in Nashville. And it was the first time I had ever recorded where you just had maybe 4 musicians on the floor and you sing the song, and then you add this and you add that and you add the vocal group and things like that. And so that's the first time I had ever seen a record recorded like that. And so I was a little nervous after that, and it sounded so different from what I had been recording in Nashville. The next day I had to fly to Houston and do a show, and then I had a night off, and I went back home to Missouri and spent the night. And then the next night I had to be in Rochester, New York. And so while I was changing planes at LaGuardia Airport, I called my producer and I said, "Hey, man, would you do me a favor?" And he said, "What's that?" I said, "Don't release this record." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I'm just afraid it's a little bit too funky for country radio, and I'm afraid they won't play it." He said, "Well, I think you're wrong. I think it's a smash, and I'm going ahead and releasing it." And thank the Lord that he did.
Yeah. Wow. No kidding.
And so it kind of became a trademark after that, the falsetto and that type of beat on my records. I had a lot of other records that were in that groove.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, and I was going to mention that. A lot of artists, that started out, doing rockabilly music or, different types of music, especially, from the Sun era. You've got people like Conway Twitty and Charlie Rich and Jerry Lee Lewis. They've kind of grooved into something different and kind of found that niche. Freddie Hart did the same thing, when he did Easy Lovin'.
Oh, he sure did.
And it hit the pocket, and man, that worked for you in such a big way.
It certainly did, and I'm so thankful for that.
And the nice thing is that you never alienated any fans, because once you have a fan, man, they love you no matter what you do. And all I know your fans, all the music that you do, because I've watched you do some of your old rockabilly stuff and then turn around and do some of your country stuff, and everybody loves it.
Well, I appreciate it, and when I do concerts, I kind of mix it together, and it seems to work.
Absolutely.
My country fans accept a few rockabilly songs in my show, and when I'm in Europe doing a rockabilly show, I always put a couple of my country hits in with it, and they accept that.
Oh, sure, absolutely. You have a tremendous, worldwide following. I mean, I get requests for your songs from all over, not just in the U.S., but over in the U.K. and New Zealand and Sweden and Norway. And man, you're known all over the world. That's amazing.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, and I've been fortunate in my life to be accepted in a lot of places, and have got to go to quite a few different countries around the world and perform.
Absolutely.
And people have been very kind to me.
Absolutely. Well, you've had a lot of great awards too. You've had so many international hits, well over 50 top 10 international hits. Of course, the record of the year, 1975, was Reconsider Me, and you have been named as one of the top country artists of all time, too, on the CMT, and I think that's wonderful, well deserved.
Well, I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I want to go back and talk about Sun Records because to me, to have somebody to be able to talk to firsthand who was there when it was all happening back at that time is just gold. Can you tell me what led up to your recording contract with Sun Records and tell me a little bit about that time?
Yes, what really got me into music business was I had won a high school talent contest in Bernie, Missouri when I had just turned 17. And one thing led to another. And band leader Jerry Mercer hired me as a featured singer in his band. And 2 or 3 months later, we opened the show for Roy Orbison and Eddie Bond on top of the concession stand at the drive-in theater in Dexter, Missouri. And so Roy went back to Memphis and told the folks at Sun Records they should give me a listen. And so they did. I wound up with an audition in probably a couple of weeks, but it was January of '57 by the time I got in the studio to do the first session, and then I did another one for them in April of that year. But the atmosphere around that little place, when we first got there that morning for the first session, we went in Taylor's Cafe next door, and there was Jerry Lee Lewis sitting there having a cup of coffee. And then when we got over and started recording, in the control room with Jack Clement was Roy Orbison, and Sam Phillips was back and forth from the front office through the studio into the control room. And Harold Jenkins drug up a chair and came out and sat by me where he could hear me singing. And a couple of months later, he became Conway Twitty.
Wow.
And also Johnny Cash was there. He was up front looking through the window into the studio. And so it was really quite amazing around that little studio in those days.
Boy, I guess so. Were you kind of nervous with all those people hanging around?
Well, yes, I was, to be honest with you.
Did you have any idea that you would become one of their peers?
Well, I had hopes, but never could have really imagined, especially after all the years of trying, that it would actually finally happen.
Wow. What was the first recording that you did there?
I did the first session, a song called Did You Tell Me, and we did 4 more songs on that session. And I did My Babe on the second session, and that's the 2 songs that seem to stick out from the Sun era to rockabilly fans around the world.
Do you remember hearing your song on the radio for the first time?
Well, the first one I heard on the radio was my first Mercury record, Kissin' Me Baby. And I went on to Mercury from Sun and went to Chicago, and they signed me, and we recorded 10 songs that day. And a month later, my first record, Kissin' Me Baby, was out on June 10th, 1957, with Foolish Thoughts on the backside of it. And so that was the first one I heard on the radio, and it was, quite gratifying to hear my record on the radio.
Oh, yeah. Mercury had a fantastic roster at that time. George Jones was on the label then, and they had a fantastic lineup.
Oh, yes, they really did. The Diamonds, the Platters. I think Patty Page might have still been there at that time. So it was an amazing, it was a major label.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, when you first started doing some tours, did you go out and do some of the package tours that they used to do back then?
I didn't do those at that time with the people. I did a show here and there with different people, but never one of the package tours like you'd see in I Walk the Line.
Sure.
But I did those in the 70s with all the country stars of the day when my big hit streak started coming.
Oh, sure.
In the 50s, I mostly worked the club circuit around southeast Missouri, northeast Arkansas, southern Illinois, and then after my record came out, I started getting booked at theaters, and they would show a rock and roll movie, and then we would do a show. And so I did that for a while, even a week stand at the Fox Theater in St. Louis.
Oh, wow.
And that turned out really good. And then Conway Twitty recommended me for that Canadian show club circuit. And so we went to Canada for the first week in '59. And then I was in that circuit for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I know Conway did a lot of tours up there, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And he had recommended Ronnie Hawkins and me. And we were both up there at the same time back then.
Wow.
That was club. You didn't dance in them. And it was like you had to play 5 hours a night, and you had to keep everybody's attention, and keep them, keep them drinking and keep the club going. One time, I was in Toronto, and we was at a place called the Le Coq d'Or, and on one side of me was Dwayne Eddy.
Wow.
And on the other side was the Four Seasons, who were still the Four Lovers at that time. And then when Dwayne Eddy left the other place, Bo Diddley came in and replaced him over there. But that's the kind of competition you had. And yet I was lucky enough to keep the club full.
Well, I can understand why.
Be over for 8 weeks.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. Well, I don't doubt it. I mean, you're very entertaining, and with a voice like that, I mean, it's you got that right in the palm of your hand. There's no doubt about it.
Well, thank you.
That is fantastic. What a great history. Tell me about Funny How Time Slips Away. You had a really big hit on this one, too. And
Yes, I did. I always loved that song, and I started singing it years before I ever recorded it. And then when I did record it, then my producer decided to reconsider me with Funny How Time Slips Away, and it came from the same album. And so it became a top 10 hit. It number 6 in Cashbox, stopped at 12 in Billboard, but it's still the biggest version and longest charting version of the song of Funny How Time Slips Away.
Wow. That's an incredible song, and it's had a life of its own. You know, it's been recorded by so many great artists, you know, Ray Price and Billy Walker and Willie Nelson and Farron Young, and of course yourself, and it's amazing. That song has really just become a favorite of all time for a lot of people.
Really has. I had a letter from the folks at ABC Watermark. They were in Hollywood, and they produced that show, the American Top 40 Country Countdown. Mm-hmm. And so they told me to listen to the show, and this was on up in the 80s, but they told me to listen on a certain date. And so I did, and when they got to the current Willie Nelson record that was in the top 40 that week, Bob Kingsley said, the most successful song Willie ever wrote was Funny How Time Slips Away. And then the intro to my record started playing. He said, but the most successful version was by Narvel in 1975,
Wow.
and that was that was really made me feel good to hear that.
Oh, absolutely. I bet you made Willie pretty happy too.
I think probably so.
Oh, that's great. Well, you have continued to record and release albums. I mean, I lost count of the albums you've got available, and you've got well over 200 recordings, and it's just amazing the body of work that you've released.
Well, thank you so much. And we did go in and do a new one and released it here for my 60th anniversary in the music business year. And so I'm going to send you a copy of that.
Wonderful. It's called Now Is the Hour.
Yes.
I am looking forward to hearing that. And folks, I do want to tell you too that you can, of course, get Narvel's music all over the internet on Amazon and iTunes and everywhere. And then you can visit his website and pick up his great music and read all about his fantastic career. And I highly recommend it. We'll put the information on our Facebook page as well, and it's mkoc.com /Narvel Felts. And it's ironically called My Kind of Country is the name of your website.
That's right. We've got something in common, haven't we?
We do, yeah. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, me too.
I wish I could say, yeah, that's where I came up with the name, but it's not. It just. Well, tell me a little more about this new album.
Well, I chose some songs. There's a few songs on it that I wrote a long time ago, or I co-wrote with some other friends years ago, and then that I didn't record. Like there's a song that I did called These Lonely Nights, and I had the idea, and I went back in the dressing room at the Paradise Club in Cairo, Illinois, and in 1958, and we wrote that song. Okay, and I never had recorded it, so it's on there. There's a song that I wrote called Jealousy. That I wrote it right after my wife Loretta and I got married, and I recorded it back then, but the tapes were lost and it never was released, and so I recorded it and it's on there. And then I did some favorites along the way too. I've got Boogie Woogie Country Girl on it, and Love Me, the one Jeannie Pruitt wrote.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think Marty Robbins had us.
Yeah, Marty had a wonderful record of that.
Oh, I can't wait to hear you do that. Man, I'll bet you just nail that one.
And and then I close it out with an evening prayer. And I think it's a well-rounded album. There's a lot of variety, but all of my albums always had variety on them.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's great. Well, I can't wait to hear it, and we'll get it on the air. It's called Now Is the Hour, and we're just going to be very happy to play it, and I really appreciate you sharing your music with us for sure.
Well, I appreciate you playing it.
I want to ask you about your son, Bub. You did an album, Ode to Bub, and he played drums for you for many years, and can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, yes. He grew up to be a great drummer, and he toured with me, toured the world and the United States and the world from Finland, well, no, let me see, from Sweden. He went from Sweden to New Zealand. He was with me. And we lost him in a car accident in 1995. And so a couple of years later, it was that long before I was able to get into that and record an album in memory of him. And I used a bunch of the tracks that he had played on. And then I recorded some new ones and some that I wrote in memory of him. And so that is how that album came about.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's a horrific tragedy. I just couldn't imagine, losing a child. And I had a band up here for over 25 years, and the last few years that I did it before I got into the radio thing, my son played drums for me, and he's 22 now, and it was just a really cool thing to have your kid up there with you.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful when Bub was with me, and we were traveling all over the country and all over the world. And at that time, my wife Loretta, when we were here in the United States, she would travel with us, and she would sell back then it was cassettes, at the end of the show. Sure. While I autographed, and so we enjoyed ourselves and had a good time. And we also have a daughter, Stacia. She was our firstborn, and she still lives here in the same town that we're in.
Oh, wow.
She's a blessing to have.
Absolutely. Now, does she do any kind of music at all?
No, she don't.
Didn't get the bug, huh?
Her husband did karaoke for a while, and she would get up and sing 2 or 3 songs at that,
Yeah.
But she never did pursue that.
Well, I'll bet she's still a good singer, though. When you got that in the genes, man, it's pretty...
Yeah, she did sound good.
Oh, that's great. Well, speaking of tour dates, you are still staying real busy, and I was looking at some of your tour dates on your website, and I see you've got a show coming up with our buddy Johnny Lee here pretty soon.
Yes, that'll be at a fair in Searcy, Arkansas. I think that's on the 15th, I believe, of September. It'll be Johnny Lee, John Berry, and me, and J.R. Rogers, and I'll be using a great band from Memphis, Double Edge. They'll be backing me.
Awesome. Well, again, the website is www.mkoc /Narvel Felts, and you can go there and read all about Narvel's wonderful career and pick up some of his great music and see where he's going to be at. And if you get a chance to see this man, go see him in concert, because you will be thoroughly entertained. It's just amazing to watch you get up there and just command that audience.
Well, thank you, Scott. And you told me you had caught my concert in Traverse City back in '05.
I certainly did, and we're hoping we can get you back up here. I'm going to give them folks at Wolverine a call and say, hey, we need to get Narvel Felts back up here again, because I'd sure love to be able to sit down and visit with you.
Well, I would love to sit down and visit with you, and I would love to come back and do some more dates for Wolverine.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the music you're going to send to me, and we were talking about the Bear Family Collection, and I can't wait to hear all that great music, and we'll get it on the air for you. And,
well, thank you so much.
Oh, I thank you, and it's been a true honor to be able to talk to you, and I want to thank you so much for taking time to be on My Kind of Country.
Well, you're certainly welcome, and thank you for contacting my manager and him leaving me a message to give you a call.
Well, I appreciate that. You tell Harold thank you for me, too. That was mighty nice.
Okay, I sure will.
You bet. Well, we're going to go back, and I'm going to play this one because I just love this one. This is Somebody Hold Me Until She Passes By, the great Narvel Felts. Thank you again for being on the show, Narvel. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Scott. The pleasure was mine.
All right. My Kind of Country continues right here on Fish Creek Radio.